So, you're back for more. Excellent. That means the angry red planet hasn't scared you away yet, and you're well on your way to surviving Mars. Once again, folks, my name is Provis, and I am your host through this adventure on an alien world. In the last video, we covered what I call the drone phase of the game, the fully robotic and autonomous era where we establish the infrastructure we need to support life. Now it's time to launch into the next phase. We're going to bring our brave pioneers from Earth to their new home. If you've been following along, your rocket should have returned to Earth at about the same time that you finished your first dome. I didn't mention this in the last video, but your rocket actually serves two purposes. It can transport materials to and from Earth, or it can carry colonists, but it can't do both. Obviously, this time, we want to select the passenger rocket. But I'm not going to take any over-enthusiastic yokel that applies. No. We can afford to pick the best of the litter. Let's make use of the filters to find the very best prospects for our colony. First off, do not accept any children or seniors, because neither will be able to work. I'd even turn off middle-aged applicants if you have enough people trying to join, because they'll be the first to hit retirement age, and I want to make sure we get a lot of productivity time with each colonist. So that leaves youth and adults. Next is specialization. Most, though not all, of your colonists will have some sort of professional background that will make them more productive in certain types of jobs. In the future, you'll want to filter by whatever you need most, but for our first batch, I recommend at least 1 botanist, 3 engineers, and 2 geologists if you have a metals deposit by your dome, which we do. You could also bring 2 scientists if you'd like to be aggressive with your research, but otherwise, I'd fill the rest of my slots with non-specialized workers. You'll have some menial jobs to work in the beginning of the game, and non-specialized workers can be re-educated later if needed. I have no need for medics or officers at this stage, and I definitely do not want any tourists. For the sex of your applicants, it doesn't matter too much. On high difficulties, it's worth trying to get people to pair off and have children, but we can always import more colonists, so we're going to leave this one alone. So now we get to move to perks. Now each of your colonists has personality traits that will make them better or worse at certain jobs and under certain conditions. Some of these stats won't make any sense to you yet, but I promise it will all make sense later. For now, what you're looking for are traits that increase comfort, morale, and most important of all, productivity. I strongly favor the workaholic trait, then enthusiast, and then party animal. I wouldn't worry about the gamer, rugged, or sexy traits for your first game. Maybe you could consider the survivor trait if you'll think you'll make a lot of mistakes. The rest are fine, but not a priority. Flaws are basically the flip side of perks. They make your colonists worse in some way, usually likely to crack under pressure and engage in some sort of vice. I'd recommend disabling all of them and see if you can get lucky with well-adjusted and composed applicants. Otherwise, you can live with glutton and hypochondriacs at the beginning of the game, maybe alcoholic and gambler later in the game. And then finally, we have quirks. These are fun, but none of them will impact you at the beginning of the game, so we're going to ignore this. So when all is said and done, I still have 49 applicants. I'm going to sort through each of these, pick my favorites, and there we go. I've got 4 non-specialized, 2 scientists, 3 engineers, 2 geologists, and 1 botanist. We've got a solid team of founders. Let's launch them to Mars, and while they travel between worlds, let's start thinking about how we'll serve their needs and put them to work. The first thing you need to know is that each of your colonists has 4 stats: health, sanity, comfort, and morale. These each do different things, but obviously you want to keep each of them as high as possible. Your colonists will try to do this on their own by visiting different service buildings, such as hospitals, restaurants, gardens, and so on. By default, if your colonists are injured, they will seek medical attention first. Then they'll try to eat some food. And last, they'll try to fulfill a random daily interest, such as shopping, gambling, socializing, etc. If they have no way to fulfill that interest, they'll find the building with the highest comfort rating instead. So your goal is simple: provide healthcare, provide food, and offer a variety of interesting activities. Now, unfortunately, each service building is going to require some workers to operate, so until we get a lot more colonists, you'll only be able to fulfill a few interests at first. I personally recommend you build an infirmary, a diner, and a grocer to start. This will cover your health and food needs, as well as the dining and shopping needs, which seem to be among the most common requests. Alternatively, you could replace the diner with a small space bar, which fulfills even more interests, but you'll feed less people per shift, and that could become a problem. It's up to you. Once you get a second dome, the space bar and open-air gym are great additions to cover even more needs. But I do not recommend building any stores or casinos until much later in the game. They're phenomenal in the late game, but these will consume a lot of advanced resources, and you're not ready for that yet. And that's it as far as early needs. Once your colonists arrive and start working, we can assign them to different shifts. But for now, with housing, health, food, and interests covered, we're ready to go. Our colonists have arrived. We'll let the rocket touch down first, and then let our colonists get acquainted with their dome. This starts what is called the founder stage of the game, where our first pioneers are effectively guinea pigs to determine if our colony is, in fact, safe and ready for humans. A strong performance here will allow us to import even more colonists. But for now, let's get to work. For each of the buildings we've constructed, you'll see that they have work shifts during the morning, day, and evening. Each of your colonists can work just one job during one shift. So let's start with the service buildings. Since we only have 12 colonists in total, we don't need these buildings running 24/7. I'm going to disable some night shifts and then reduce the number of colonists who can work at a building by right-clicking on the excess personnel slots to disable them. So now I've got 2 people working at the grocer, 1 per shift, same for the infirmary. The diner is the only building I'll allow open at night, so people working during the morning and day will definitely have a way to eat some prepared food. Now, by default, workers will find any job available, but they'll always prefer to work their own specialization. So, let's set that up next. Hopping over to the farm, we only have 1 botanist, so we can only work 1 shift, and that's actually enough to sustain most early crops. Now, what I can do, though, to make this worker even more effective will be to activate a heavy workload. We'll need to unlock this via our politics first, but basically it gets more productivity out of your work shift. Weirdly enough, heavy workload has diminishing returns. It's actually very, very effective to have only 1 worker on overtime than to put multiple workers on the same shift. I guess workaholics are all loners? Whatever, it works. And it's the reason I love the workaholic trait. We also need advanced resources, and this is where our engineers are going to come into play. I researched a polymer factory before the rocket arrived, so we can build one of these outside of the dome. Now, this requires water and some of our fuel to operate, and it needs to be placed within range of the dome, but this secures 1 key resource early in the game. The other factories for machine parts and electronics will need to be unlocked through research and placed inside the domes, or if we're eager to produce our own now, we could always buy a small factory prefab from Earth. Producing machine parts requires a consistent source of metal, but electronics require rare earth materials, which are much harder to come by. So we'll be skipping electronics for now, but that is something you'll want to have access to eventually. Speaking of metals, let's put our geologists to work at this metal deposit by building a metals extractor within range and assigning shifts. Again, I'll make use of the heavy workload once this is available. Now, this deposit is not infinite, but it should be plenty for now. And finally, we need some science. A research lab for our scientists will come in handy, though it's a little expensive to maintain. But even so, the faster we can research new technologies, the better off we'll be in the long run. Now that's it for production, at least for now, but there's a lot more buildings that we could place down later in the game as our population and needs grow, including bigger hospitals, more factories, those stores I mentioned earlier, transportation between other domes, even spires that can be placed in the center of a dome. I'll let you explore those at your own pace, now that you have your footing. Go wild, experiment, make mistakes. You'll grow from them, I promise. Alright, let's talk about everyone's favorite and totally non-controversial topic, politics. This is new ground in Surviving Mars Relaunched, so even the veterans should pay attention here. Now, as you've noticed from the last video, our starting politics is completely dominated by Earth. A council of multiple sponsors and parties get together in a parliamentary system, each with their own agendas, and every few sols, you can vote on a set of laws to give yourself an extra boost. For example, we unlocked research outsourcing. We could unlock heavy workloads, or get extra rewards from milestones, etc., etc. So long as you keep a majority of the parties happy, you'll be in good shape. Once the colonists first arrive on Mars, this council remains in power. You can even build an Earth assembly, where you can assign officers as diplomatic workers and generate extra funding once you vote for Tier 3 sponsor relations. But once you achieve 30 colonists on the planet, a new option becomes available: the Martian Assembly. This is where things start to get really interesting. As the Martians develop their own cultural identity, you'll have to choose what form of government they want to adopt, which will determine your initial laws and establish new political parties. Gone are the factions of Earth. Now the game to win the hearts and minds of Mars really begins. This will be challenging, but the rewards are immense. If you can take a look at laws here, you can see we were only barely scratching the surface before. There are a lot of options in front of us, almost like a new tech tree, but purely focused around our cultural values, economics, and governance. Review these new laws, especially your culture, education, and representation laws, to see if you need to make tweaks to please your factions and secure their support. Who knows? Given enough time, you might even be able to convince your fellow Martians to throw off the yoke of Earth and embrace true independence. Now, as far as personal recommendations, don't rush into the Martian Assembly too quickly. There are a lot of laws that you can get passed with just the Earth Council, and it will be far easier to secure a majority. I'd recommend passing most, if not all, of the existing laws first, and then you can make adjustments once you know what factions you'll be co-ruling with. Before we end this video, I would be remiss if I didn't warn you of the environmental danger inherent to Mars. You'll recall when we selected our colony site, the surveys reported a likelihood of meteor storms, cold waves, dust storms, and dust devils. This particular site isn't going to face frequent disasters, but some of them do require preparation to overcome. So let me walk you through them quickly. Let's start with the meteors. Rocks will fall from the atmosphere and randomly strike locations on the map. Now, given that the map is massive, the odds you'll be struck isn't very high, but if you are in the target path, be prepared for your buildings to be destroyed, your domes to crack, and your resources to be crushed in the impact. In the early game, you can only hope for the best. Later on, there will be a research option to develop laser defenses and shoot meteors down before impact. If you're on a map with a lot of meteors, this will be critical. The dust devils are just as random as the meteors. One will appear in the wastes, then travel randomly across the map before dissipating. At a distance, they're harmless. But if they do happen to path across your buildings or drones, they'll leave a trail of destruction. Your only counter are to use domes and landing pads. If the dust is covered in concrete, the dust devil will burn out on impact. So if you happen to notice that the cyclones are frequently spawning and pathing into your base, you could consider placing a landing pad or two just to create a wall that will block the devil before it hits. Dust storms and cold waves are different. They aren't localized and will impact the entire map, so if one is approaching, you will be affected. During a dust storm, your rockets cannot launch or land. Your solar panels will be disabled, and your power conduits and pipes have a very high likelihood to develop a leak and drain your life support or power reserves at an alarming rate. Fortunately, the high wind speed will boost the power generation of your wind turbines. So, if you know dust storms are approaching, you're going to need to build enough turbines to mostly replace your solar panels and ensure you have enough batteries to last. And as far as leaks are concerned, repairing them takes too long. I'd recommend you delete the faulty cable or pipe to staunch the flow, and then immediately rebuild them. That is your safest option. Cold waves are a little different. Every building and dome in your colony will need to draw 3 times more power just to keep warm. This can cripple your electrical grid and cause cascading failures. You could turn off your exterior buildings, But then the intense cold will cause damage and your buildings will need to be repaired via normal maintenance. Additionally, all of your water towers will freeze and the water within will be unusable. So you have two methods to fight this. First, for all exterior buildings, drop them down to only one shift per day. That is enough to prevent the damage while reducing your power draw. Second, you can research and place subsurface heaters around your colony. This will require water and a tremendous amount of power, but will emit a radius of heat that protects all buildings around it. Usually this is a net savings of power and can prevent your water from freezing. Without heaters, it's extremely difficult to brute force the extra power draw long enough to survive. So don't wait on these until it's too late. And on that very cheerful note, that's all we'll be covering in this video. Follow my recommendations and you'll be set to produce every resource a growing colony needs. Soon enough, the landscape will be dotted with domes, and the new Martians will discover that they have lofty ambitions of their own, which we will cover in the next video. Thank you all for watching. My name is Provis, and I wish you all the best of luck with your colonists. See you next time.